All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with our next panel. We are joined by, I jokingly called this the O Canada panel because we have a number of representatives from Canada, and I think it's a bit more descriptive than the actual title in your agenda. So first off, we have Christine Deloge, and I apologize if I'm hacking anyone's names, please correct me, Senior Advisor to the CIO for the Government of Canada. Patricia Wiebe of British Columbia, Director of Identity Architecture for that province's identity program, and Andre Boson from SecureKey, who is EVP of Marketing. So the way that this is going to go is each of the panel participants is going to provide approximately a 10-minute overview of their program, of their experience, et cetera, and then we'll engage in a Q&A with them. So if you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourself and then start off.
Thank you very much, Ryan. First of all, I'd like to thank Canterra for the opportunity to present together with BC as well as with SecureKey, because it is a good indication of the type of partnership that we have, and it's a story that we're very proud of in Canada. Why are we proud of this story? First of all, because it's client-centric. It also is the leadership of many. It's innovative, it's standards-based, and very importantly, it works. And then I'll talk a little bit about moving forward challenges for the future. We've got a complex ecosystem. I work at the Treasury Board of Canada, so that's the management board for the Government of Canada, so it's setting policies and setting also measurement targets and tracking performance. We also work with Shared Services Canada, which is the operator for shared and common services at the IT front. And we've got departments and agencies that are interested in delivering programs and services but at the cheapest possible cost, of course. And we've got the Office of the Privacy Commissioner that is interested in protecting the privacy of Canadians and ensuring that we do so. Strategic partnerships for us, first of all, through a very important component or partnership, and that is the Joint Councils of the Public Sector Service Delivery Council. So that's the, if you want, we've got federal, provincial, municipal levels in Canada, and we work very closely through them, working with, for example, the equivalent of the one-stop shop for services to clients at the federal level, Service Canada, as well as the counterparts in the provinces and territories. And on the other side, we've got the CIOs. We've got the Public Sector CIO Council, which represents all these various jurisdictions. And the marriage of the two means that we can align decisions that will enable services by having supportive investments in technology and having them aligned. So that to us is an extremely important partnership, and that is why I'm so happy that Patricia is here with me, because it does represent that type of partnership for us. International dialogues are also very important, and that is where we work quite closely with organizations like Canterra and other informal groupings, because we find that we are all facing the same common challenges. And by bringing different challenges, different views, perspectives, and also solutions, we can build some stronger, more implementable solutions. I'll mention DIAC, the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada, as being a partnership, but I know that Andre is going to be talking about that later on. We've done quite a bit in terms of streamlining rationalization of services within the Government of Canada. We've consolidated websites from 1,500 to one, as well as looked at how we could consolidate the back end for our services. And cyber authentication and federating identity is very much part of that, supporting that effort. The basic principles with which we work are essentially, it's a federated approach. It's a collaborative approach which puts privacy first for citizens, gives client choice, assumes that there is an important role in identity management and in credentials management for government, and looks at collaboration between various players in various levels of government, but also with the private sector. And it assumes that if we want to be successful, we have to do things in a phased, controlled fashion so as to be able to get traction and have results. And that's why we split the federating the credentials and federating identity component. The federating identity, federation of credentials aspect has, as I said, privacy, but as a major component, it also relies on an innovative relationship with the private sector to give clients a choice. And it also builds on the fact that financial institutions have invested and continue to invest very heavily in security. So we are leveraging that investment that has been made by the private sector. In terms of credential broker services or services from the Government of Canada in terms of cyber authentication, we have worked with private sector and to put in place a credential broker service which is operated by a secure key and which allows the client to basically bring their own credential from their banks in order to transact with the Government of Canada. And why have we done that? In part, as I said, leveraging the investments that the financial institutions are making, but also to bring convenience, because a Government of Canada credential may be something that, that an individual would use maybe once in a year or two, whereas the banking credential is something that a private citizen would be using much more often, and that they will remember for the next time. The solution that we have in place exists since 2012, and when I said it works, well, we have millions of users. In terms of the concierge, how it works is essentially banks join the concierge service, the broker service that is operated by Secure Key. And we anticipate that there will be more and more users joining in as more and more banks join in. In terms of who are the banks that are now part of that service, names that you would recognize in the States as well: BMO, Scotiabank, TD Bank, Tangerine, which is known as, it used to be ING Bank in Canada, as well as credit union services. And a user will get the option of using either a banking credential or a Government of Canada credential. That's what I'd like to say at this point. Now, we're using very much of the same approach as we move forward in terms of federating identity. Using the very same concepts that we had in terms of privacy, client choice, also collaboration, looking at standards around which we can validate information about identity, and ultimately be able to have governments confirm that a person is who they say they are, all levels of government in a secure fashion, and also in a privacy respectful way. That is something that we are working on. In fact, we are putting together a business case co-chaired with a team with BC, and which involved pretty much a large number of partners from the federal as well as provincial jurisdictions. And we are looking forward to progress in that area with the support of our partners. Thank you. Yes? I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning. My name is Patricia Wiebe. I'm Director of Identity Architecture with the province of British Columbia. British Columbia is the province that's on the far west side of Canada, just north of Seattle, and we have Olympics there sometimes, so maybe you remember us from there. So it's a province of about 4.5 million citizens, and so it's small but still significant. And we have been quite involved in the identity identity landscape in Canada for some time. My role is in terms of architecture as well as standards development, so it's interesting to be here part of the Cantera discussion. I spend a fair amount of my time working on standards in terms of identity assurance, technology and data standards, and so I'm well aware of the Cantera work and other. And I look after the standards. Sometimes we have to develop our own, but also adopting industry standards and that from an enterprise perspective for the province, as well as for the pan-Canadian scene, which is where as Christine is mentioning, we're working together on some standards that are not just for BC, not just for the Government of Canada, but will work for the other provinces, territories, and jurisdictions as well. Within the Government of BC, I look after the identity program there in terms of its architecture. And we have a variety of areas that we look after. We look after identity management for the enterprise, so the government workers, and how they interact with digital services to do their job. And that's often spread across many organizations. We look after the citizen space as well, how citizens interact with government. And sometimes that's happening in a personal context. So me as a citizen, just my everyday life, trying to do things, as well as in a business context. So how you can, similar I think to what Ryan was speaking of in terms of ID.me, is how do you represent yourself as being a member of a group. So we have some solutions in those space. The biggest initiative though that we've been working on, which is the cool project, is to issue a smart card credential to our citizens to help them represent their identity. So I have with me here my BC Services card, which is really a smart card driver's license. Inside this driver's license is a contactless chip that is based on the EMV standards, Europay, MasterCard, Visa. I gotta say it every time, right? So we actually have a Visa chip in here, and it is interoperable with the Visa payment network in that sense. We have been pursuing this as a way to have stronger authentication. So going above the username and password solution and really aiming to build level 3 assurance, a level 3 credential and a level 3 identity provider, essentially, for government that can be used within the government proper, within the province of BC, as well as integrating with federal services or other jurisdictions down the road. So someday we'll work on that, that part. So the broker solution that Christine was speaking of is with the banks at this point in time, but in the future it would extend to other jurisdictions or other credential providers. One of the distinguishing things, though, that we do is we do that federated identity, and that is that when a person registers for one of these cards, they're being identity proofed at the counter, just like for their driver's license. So we're collecting all of their identity information and verifying it in the ways that we do, to the same degree as a trusted driver's license. And then that identity, those identity attributes can then be used in our authentication solution. So it's not only are you using strong authentication, but you're getting verified identity attributes to the relying parties that consume them. So that's the project that has been underway for a few years. And to do the chip authentication, we use secure key technologies, and so that's why I'm here with Andre as well. The idea, it being a contactless card, is that you would be able to tap it, just like we tap contactless Visa, contactless MasterCards. And so we believe that's something that citizens are getting used to and will be familiar, but we are leaders in terms of bringing this concept of how we do things in the payment world to the identity world. So I have with me here a little USB stick, which looks like a flash drive. It's actually a contactless reader. So we're working on bringing forward small devices, technology to the citizens that they can just simply plug into their laptops today, and then during the authentication transaction, it's really just a short tap. And we're also working on how we can, sorry, this is a BlackBerry. It's not going to quite work on the BlackBerry yet, but how we can get these cards to be tapped on NFC mobile phones to prove their identity and to use these as card readers, but also to get into the mobile application space as well. So, so we're working on, just generally, how do we bring identity into applications using modern technology and at a level 3, in a level 3 space. I think over to you. What would you like to talk about?
Thanks, Patricia. Thanks, Christine. So what's kind of cool, what's going on in Canada, I think, is there's a working model now for ordinary users of the internet to be able to prove who they are online. And so Government of Canada was very instrumental in getting this whole thing going, in that they recognized they had a real problem to solve. In order to deliver services as government online, you have to have a pretty strong assurance that the person on the other end is who they claim to be, certainly for transaction integrity, but also just for the government to get it wrong is a very, very bad thing. It just does not produce confidence in citizens. So the challenge for government is that, okay, I need a high level of assurance, but the challenge is as a user, I don't go to the internet very often. And so Government of Canada recognized this, having many years experience delivering services online, that users don't come often, so they've often forgotten their password. So as government, how do we solve this problem of getting high business assurance when every time the user shows up, they're resetting their password? So that's the conundrum that they were kind of facing. And so their strategy in trying to solve the problem was, rather than trying to continue to take the security bar up even higher, try and find a model that users could identify for service in a more easy way. And so the recognition in this was that maybe if we could get Canadians to use something they use more frequently, and it also has a high level of trust, that might be a better way for them to present for service. And that's how the Security Concierge service came into being, is that the government was looking for a service where Canadians could use something they possessed already that was trustworthy to identify for service when they wanted to come to government. And so that's the service Christine talked about. It's a service been running for 2 years now. Canadians can use bank accounts now to get to government. Important in understanding how that works, though, is that there's also a good privacy model underneath, and if I get some time at the end, I'll talk about the privacy model. And so too with BC now. So BC's got the similar challenge that they would like to be able to serve all sorts of use cases as a province or a state. They have to serve in person every day when people show up to the counters for driver's license use cases and healthcare and things like that. But certainly citizens also want to get access to services online. So the challenge for the province was how to solve that problem. And unlike Government of Canada, the province actually has a unique advantage in that they have something that's in the user's wallet and the user always carries. And so that was the innovation for BC, was actually to recognize that they have a card that's already in the wallet and to put something inside that card that could be used by the user. And so as Patricia's pointed out, while we have a USB token that users are using to access initially, what we're seeing is that the NFC readers are coming out in consumer electronics of all kinds. Every Android device today has an NFC reader. All the BlackBerry devices have NFC readers. Even the next version of iPhone will also have an NFC reader in it. So what we're seeing is that users are going to be able to go down to the store and buy the NFC reader they need to be able to tap their card on so they can identify for service. The cool thing here now is that for BC is that they can bring digital ID and street ID together, which is very, very unique. Today, my digital ID and my street ID are very different, and they have very different attack vectors, and there's no way to bring the two things together. So now, when I want to go access to healthcare in the province of BC, I can tap my services card at a doctor's office. The doctor gets positive patient ID, so they know it's really me, and importantly, the province gets to say I also really went to the doctor. What I can do later that day is I can go home and I can buy an Android phone at Best Buy, and if I want to be able to see my health records at home, what I'll be able to do is say, hey, to BC, I want to see my health record. And they're going to say, who are you? And so I'm going to download the BC Health Services app, and I'm going to tap my card on the back of my phone, all on a 4-digit PIN that goes with it. And now the province has very, very strong confidence, it's really me, because I haven't reported the card as missing, and I can access my health records on my phone. My street ID and my digital ID have come together. So that is kind of cool. And so that gets to the standards discussion that we're talking about with Cantera today. One of the things that's important is standards for industry is important, but it's even, in my view, even more important for users. So one of the places that standards actually plays out is in cars. We see that the drivers in driving, that the steering wheel, the turn signals, the gas pedal, and the brake are in the same place for cars all over the world. Even when they drive on the other side of the road, all that stuff's in the same place. And that's what makes driving successful around the globe, because the users can do it the same place no matter where they go. And so that's important. Users can manage the ritual. So too with payment networks. When it comes to payment, whether debit or credit, the payment ritual, no matter where I go across the globe, the way I pay as a user is the same. And so the benefit to me, the user, is I have very high confidence that I can achieve this thing I'm about to go do. Today, when it comes to online access, we do have a standard. It's user ID and password. So there is a standard. That's good news. The bad news is that it's very weak. And I'm not going to do a password rant because we're all pretty fluent on that. But the challenge is we've recognized that passwords are weak. And so what to do instead? And so the challenge right now as an industry is that the race is on to 2FA, or multi-factor authentication. Everybody's running down this path. And as much as we have a password hell that we're facing today, the second factor hell that's coming is nothing. Is much worse, in fact, than the password hell that's happening. So today, if I want to use, well, this is real life, right? So I've got Evernote, Twitter, and Facebook. They like to send me an SMS message to my phone. So that's what those guys do. I got Google and LastPass. They like to have an app on my phone, and I have to look up a special purpose code on the app if I want to get in. With PayPal, I got to stick this thing in my computer if I want to get access to that service. And there's going to be some new service that comes out tomorrow. If I want to get access, I've got to look in the camera and say boo, right? I cannot have 300 web services in my life all dreaming up new ways to authenticate me. So we've got to get to a standard mechanism for identity and authentication on the internet if users are ever going to be able to accomplish this. So standards are really, really important underneath all of this. So the next piece is that I want to go back to payment networks for a second from 2 points of view. So when you think about everybody in the room here has a credit card from a different provider, and all of us can go to any merchant on the planet with no prior relationship and you can buy stuff. So that's kind of cool. Users are very well versed in how to make that happen. No training required because they already get it. Let's look at it from the opposite point of view, from a merchant point of view. Merchants do not care what credit card you use to pay. They really don't. They want good funds. That's all they care about. So Walmart, as an example, will take Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover. They'll take debit cards. They'll take PayPal. They're going to take Bitcoin when Bitcoin gets popular. They want good funds. We don't have that equivalent of good funds for identity and authentication, and that's what's required. We need a global network where users can present for service with something they have already for the places that they want to go. And that's kind of what you're hearing of what's emerging in Canada. The government of Canada's got a standard for Canadians to present for service, and that same technique now is being used in BC, with second factor included, so that people can present for service with the province. It starts to build, though. Now, as you heard, there's a collaboration happening where I can use my BC Services card to present to Government of Canada if I want to get access to my tax return, all with privacy-enhancing model underneath. What's cool is that the banks that are serving in the Canadian network are interested in identity services, too, when it comes to opening bank accounts. So I'll be able to take my BC Services card soon and open a bank account with TD Bank on the internet. And that's something we're working on in this group that we talk about in Canada called DIAC, the Digital Identity and Authentication Council of Canada. So it's the equivalent of IDSG in Canada to make that kind of thing happen. So the model's happening, and the user standards are starting to emerge. So that's really, really important. So the next piece then is standards is going to be important, particularly as it relates to second factor. So FIDO, the FIDO Alliance, is going to be a very, very important mechanism for this second factor thing to get standardized. So there are many companies on the planet that are participating on this. The big players, all the big internet web properties are there. There's large merchants there, and there's a lot of technology providers there focusing on mechanisms for users to be able to do second factor on their own. So what FIDO is like Bluetooth, but it's for web services. So I can go and buy a phone in any web shop, and then I can go buy a car and pair those two things together with Bluetooth. No relationship in advance. So FIDO's going to do the same thing for web services. I'll be able to go down to the Best Buy and buy a new laptop. I'm going to be able to bring it home. I'm going to be able to pair it with my bank to show that it's really me. So it's going to allow me to do strong second factor, and it's something I can accomplish myself as a user. So that, to me, is how the second factor story is going to get worked out. So this is really, really important. I just wanted to hit another contrast point, and then I'll kind of wrap up. So it's interesting to me that Facebook, as an example, has access to nothing I really care about, and they have all the crazy password rules. I promise I'll have a long, crazy password. I promise I'll change it often, and I promise I won't share it across any other sites. I make all those promises that I never keep, right? By contrast, my bank, which has access to all my money, has a 4-digit card on their PIN. And that sounds like a security paradox. Why aren't the banks losing money? And the reason is because it's that second factor thing that's so important. What we know about the cards, the EMV cards, not the magstripe cards we have here in the US, EMV is coming to the US, but it's not everywhere yet. What's important about EMV is that they're unique. And so there's no way to copy the card today. There's no way to copy that card. So every card is unique. And so what we know was that if the card is there, and the 4-digit PIN is there, and the user hasn't reported the card stolen, then we've got pretty high confidence that the user is there. And so we're trying to take that same simplistic model that we use in payment networks now and bring it to identity authentication online. And so that's kind of what the Canadian model is all about, is just creating a collaboration between organizations who want to serve consumers online, and rather than doing it in a siloed approach, doing it as a networked approach. Certainly the risk is going to go down for all of the organizations that participate this way, and it's also going to be better for users, because now I don't have to go through frustrating bespoke authentication and enrollment mechanisms everywhere I go. So that's really what the Canadian model is all about. What the opportunity here is now to take some of these learnings. I think we've got a lot of good things going on in Canada, and there's interesting things happening here in the US with IDSG and NSTIC, and also interesting things happening in the UK. So now the opportunity is to try and get a global dialogue going about how we're going to make identity authentication work. Much like we have the same way with steering wheel, steering wheel, gas pedal, and brake pedal all in the same place, and passports, those work globally. Payment cards, they work globally. We've got to get that same answer for identity authentication, and that's what we were bringing to the table, saying we don't have all the answers, but we've got a very good start, and we're hoping that other jurisdictions go the same way. So thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, so at this point, we're going to transition into Q&A with the panel. I have more than enough questions and a microphone, so I'm happy to lead that exercise, but if you have questions that you want to interject into the process, please just raise your hand, and we'll pull you into that. So to start off, one question that I had as I was listening is that you had mentioned the banking system and their role as IDPs inside of the Canadian ecosystem. Can you talk a little bit about any challenges that you faced during that process of onboarding those banking institutions in as IDPs, and what was the motivating factor for them to participate in this as a banking institution, as an IDP? What really drove that from the banking's perspective? If
Kristen, do you want to start, or you want me to start?
I think I'd like you to start, and I'll add. Yeah.
Okay. So getting the banks on board. So important, this topic actually came up in the last speaker when you were speaking, Ryan, about how do we know this assertion that I'm getting from this network is trustworthy or not. So similar to the Cantera framework, what Government of Canada did is used Cantera as a mechanism to decide for a framework for onboarding IDPs. And so there's a process called certification and accreditation that IDPs have to use to become part of this network. It's a very, very rigorous and thorough process that IDPs have to go through. And not surprisingly, banks are kind of meet the hurdle there. So the banks were able to demonstrate that they can meet these hurdles for Government of Canada. So all of the banks went through a CNA process with us as we rolled out the service. So that's how we got the level of assurance required to meet the Government of Canada's requirements here. But to Ryan's question, why bother? Why would they do this is another question. Well, I can tell you that they are getting paid to be part of the network, but as a bank, it's a rounding error in their financials, so it's not really a pure financial motivation that they're here for. They're here for a couple of reasons. One of the things that we kind of were able to convince them is that the banks. It's funny, that's actually how I got started in this whole space. I was trying to figure out how to open a bank account on the internet, and it turns out that all of the ecosystem players have very different motivators. But if you look at the superset of motivators, they're actually kind of aligned. And so in the Canadian model, the banks were very interested in trying to figure out how to open a bank account on the internet. And with the global scheme for anti-money laundering and for enrollment for KYC, they had to do a lot of things in the branch, and they just had no idea how they're going to do that online. So the feds control the regulations, and they set the framework for doing all that, but they actually don't have the identity documents. Turns out the provinces have the identity documents. So the province was in a very good place to actually make the digital stuff happen, but they don't control the federal standards. So the banks were interested in getting digital ID going, so it was a kind of a get to get. They kind of took it on faith that if they started this thing going and participated, that they would get benefits downstream in the form of digital ID back, which is what they wanted. And that's the argument we gave to them when we started this whole thing, and they believed, and so they got onto the network. So that was part of the motivation, Ryan. The second motivation, though, is you think about, from a banking point of view, if I become an IDP in a network like this, one of the benefits is that if a user has, and I have 300 user IDs and passwords, 10 of them I'm probably going to stay with my primary providers. The other 290 are an opportunity for the bank to serve me when I go there. So at the end of every one of these places that I'm going on the internet, there's an authentication contract. So there's a revenue stream available to the bank for authenticating me in these places I go. That's the RP revenue stream that we all talk about. So that's the first one. There's a trust benefit to the bank, is that now they can help build their own brand by extending their trust for consumers to other places they go on the internet. That's the second benefit. A third potential benefit is they have the potential to be IDPs themselves and start sharing identity attributes downstream and getting paid for that for enrollments. So it's a third potential benefit. But the fourth is that to the extent that I anchor my whole online life in my bank or my wireless carrier for that matter, invariably at the end of every one of these authentication contracts is payment. So they become top of wallet for payment, which is an additional downstream benefit they expect to gather as they go. Christine, I don't know if you want to build on that at all.
I'll simply mention convenience as one of the factors that there was there for the bank. Convenience for the client, so that was one factor. I'll talk a bit about the future perhaps, because you talked about identity. In Canada, there's a part of information about identity that is at the provincial territorial level, and that is about deaths, births and deaths of those born in Canada. But there's the other element at the federal level, which is information about those that may be born abroad. So either it could be temporary foreign workers, it could be permanent resident, it could be citizens of Canada or refugees. And eventually along the way, what would be, and I'm saying what if we are in a position to, as a federated organization or a federation of organizations, prove that people are who they say they are, then that has a value also, I would suggest, for the banks, in the sense that if you want to bring your services either at the counter or online to a greater level of integrity, you want to know that people are who they say they are. And the authoritative sources from that perspective are within the federal or the provincial territorial government. So that perhaps is something that we will be in a position to explore in the future. Thank you.
So, being that in the States, one of the things that you have to kind of deal with once you start talking about PII is how do you work with Canada, or how do you transport data back and forth from Canada, which obviously is not necessarily you can't really do, is how do you solve the PII problem when in the broadest definition of PII, a unique identifier is PII. It doesn't have to be your name, it doesn't have to be your social, your national ID, it's just some identifier. How do you solve that problem with such a broad definition of PII?
When do you start?
Well, I was just going to say that obviously in what we're describing in terms of credential, those are anonymous credentials, right? For privacy reasons. When we get into federating identity, that is a different thing altogether, and that's where we hope to be able to go directly to authoritative sources in order to get a confirmation, a yes or a no, in a very privacy respectful way, that the information that is being provided is yes, it matches, or no, it doesn't match. And if it doesn't match, that means that you should be doing some more investigation. That's the non-technical answer to the question, and I will let my technical colleagues, because this is what makes it interesting and I think effective. It's the combination of an approach which has service and technology at the same table in order to look at how we improve services.
Patricia, why don't you talk about the BC card, or do you want me to talk about the federal idea, then you can build on that maybe?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so how do we do this thing in Canada? I'm using my bank account to get to the government. That sounds a terrible idea. They're going to build a big Uber profile, and now the banks and the government are talking together. This is terrible, right? That's the kind of the perception you have to kind of overcome from the outset. Well, the truth is that that's not how it works at all. So I want to go back to payment networks, and I'm going to talk about what happens with the service model in Canada. So as a user, each of us here has a debit card in our wallet, and each of us can go over to London and go over to Barclays and take £100 out of local ATM. As a user, we kind of get that Barclays does not get a permanent attachment to our bank account back home. So users kind of have a notion of how payment networks work already. So the way the service works in Canada is that we diversify the handles for everywhere it gets used. So although we're using the same underlying instrument, it looks different everywhere it gets used. So as an example, if I use my Bank of Canada credential and I go over to our IRS, which is the Canada Revenue Agency, when I use my bank credential there, let me just explain how that works. I went to CRA, IRS, and said, hey, I want to get in. So they're going to say, who are you? And so the Security Concierge service comes up, and I click on the bank that I have a relationship with. So I clicked on my bank, and then I get taken over to my bank, and I authenticate with my bank the way I do every day. If I successfully authenticate with my bank, what the bank will do is produce an anonymous security token based on the standard we provided. So they produce this token, they give it back to our service. Our service takes it, and we re-anonymize it and add salt, and then we know where it's going. So we add salt depending on what it's going. So we know it's going to CRA, so we add a key for CRA, and we give an anonymous handle over to CRA. So CRA's got this thing. It's anonymous, so that they're in one of two conditions. If they've seen it before, they say, hi, Andre, welcome back. If they haven't seen it, they take this anonymous handle and then proceed to do the same thing they would have done otherwise if they were going to give me a user ID and passwords, which is they do their identity proofing. Having done that, they bind this token to my profile. So that's how it works at Site 1. I go to a second place in the Government of Canada. May I go to HRSDC, which is our benefits destination. If I do that same kind of transaction, the interaction from the user point of view is exactly the same. What's different is when they receive an anonymous token from the same bank from our service, we have anonymized it differently for HRSDC. The next time we go to HRSDC, they're going to get the same handle they got the first time, but it won't be the same one that we gave to CRA. So there is no PII that gets shared across our P-space the way the service works. That's how we solve that problem. So the next piece is that making sure that the users are involved with the dialogue. So in this first part of the dialogue, well, there is no PII being shared at all. All we have is an anonymous security token that's being used in our P-space. As we move to identity information, which the province is doing, the user will be involved with the dialogue. They'll see your name and your address and your photo are going to go over to the destination. Are you okay with that? Yes. And then BC will consent for that transaction to happen. So that's how we solve the PII problem, is have the users in the dialogue, be very clear about what's being shared, and then also downstream provide the revocation techniques that they need to be able to get their data back if they so choose. So that's the, I don't know if I'm going to build on that, Patricia.
Yeah, you kind of said what I was going to say.
Sorry.
Thanks, Andre. So for the service related to BC Services Card, I mean, we do have that approach of operating with the anonymous identifier approach, which may be useful in some use cases, but also when we were talking about verified identity attributes, the ability to share those. However, we don't want to build up an identifier that is used across all relying parties, right? So even with the sharing of identity attributes, there's still a different identifier for every relying party to minimize the profiling capabilities there. And yeah, of course, encryption techniques and all of that go in the mix. As Andre was saying, you know, more of a consent model. So within government, it's more like you have to justify that you can get these identity attributes, and the user has to be notified and informed of these things. And when you're more in the private sector space, it's more about a consent model. And so we're still working through that, but we believe that with consent, informed consent models, that we can share identifiers across jurisdictions and across parties.
So every identity and access management program has its own unique set of business opportunities, challenges, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to harmonize all of those different challenges and priorities across the provinces, and then what you think maybe some of the challenges might be moving beyond Canada and taking this model to more of an international type of play?
Patricia and Christine actually collaborated on a working group where they're actually sorting out issues just like this, so I think it'd be a good thing for you maybe to share some of your thoughts there.
Sure. I mean, when I think about harmonization, I mostly think about interoperability and the standards, which is the theme that we're talking about this morning as well here in this group, right? So we have had lots of collaborative working group discussions on our assurance standards, we're working on data standards, you know, still looking to the industries as what is out there, but sometimes we have to create our own standards for the work that we're going to do. So a lot of harmonization is talking through the issues, as well as looking for examples of things that you can copy from, you know, like the payment network analogy, that we can build on that, which just takes us a step further.
So there's a part that is around the technology and the standards, and there's the part that is about what it takes to be a trusted authoritative source. And I think we heard from Mr. Hughes this morning about, well, what are we doing around that? And that is very much part of the work that we are doing, because if you want to have a federated approach to identity, if you want to be able to reduce the duplication of costs that is occurring across not just each jurisdiction, but various programs across various departments, across various jurisdictions, then you have to make sure that you are a trusted source of information. It means that there has to be a certain rigor in terms of the processes that you are using in order to confirm that the person is who they say they are. And you're only as weak as the weakest link. So it means that it has to work right across the members of the federation. So that is part of the challenges that we are looking at. It's not just all about technology. In fact, it is about building a common awareness across the various jurisdictions as to what's the nature of the issues we need to fix. It's also about what's the governance that we need, what are the MOUs that we need in order to make sure that the federation will be as strong as it can be in terms of validation or confirmation of identity.
Just to build on that, what's important is actually being a small country, we have a small advantage in that we can get, we have a small set of banks that kind of represent, 5 large banks get you 98% coverage of the user population. So that was one thing that helped. We've got 3 large carriers. They could probably get you to 80+% of the user population. So being able to get all these parties in a room and have a dialogue about it was key in making this all go. What's happening now is through DIAC is there's a national forum for dialogue and for action to make these things happen. So I talked about the pilot we're working on right now to be able to use a BC driver's license as an example to open a bank account on the internet. We've got a second variation on where I could use my mobile ID to open a bank account on the internet. These are proof of concepts. It won't pass the KYC muster yet. The BC thing will. The carrier thing, we've got some work to do. But now the provinces are getting into the dialogue as well. So the other jurisdictions in Canada at the provincial or state level are all joining, but also at the city level too. So at the municipal level, I'll be able to get access to my property tax as an example, sign my kids up for skating lessons and things like that. I'm going to be able to start signing permission letters for my kid to go on a trip with the local recreation center, so I can do a permission letter online. So those are all use cases that are starting to happen. So we have one advantage of size in that we can get all the players into the room and actually get a dialogue going. And then there's a level of pragmatism about just making it happen. So what's interesting is, like the tension between the state level and the federal level here in Canada, in the past there's been jurisdiction, and each jurisdiction needs to have sovereignty over their problems. So what's important here is that the provinces and the feds and municipalities each recognized the thing that they had to contribute, but if they wanted to make this thing work as a whole, they had to find a way to collaborate. And that's what's happened, is that we found a way to make the dialogue happen.
Great. Anybody have a question? Yeah, sure.
So, do you treat identity the same as attribute or other separate things? In other words, if I want to do this validation not card for my identity, but I don't want to get my bank's attribute to be distributed to the provider party. If I go to an e-commerce website, maybe I just want to get maybe ID means attribute, let's say RT. Is there some kind of probability between IDs and attribute providers? Is that
Christine, you want to take
Well,
that?
I will take the first part, but I think that Patricia will also have some answers to that, and André may want to complete. I think that the first thing is that in the context of the Government of Canada, we have anonymous credentials, which we've just described, and this is a standards-based solution. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we have choice for the client. So the client can choose, for convenience sake, to use a banking credential, but for whatever reason, they may choose also to not use a banking credential and use a Government of Canada credential. So the choice is there for them to make. Then when we look at identity, this is, for us, different. And we're using the same principles, but we would like to be able to confirm with authoritative sources, and we mentioned the sources at the federal as well as the provincial and territorial level to be able to confirm that the person is who they say they are. So because there are consequences. I mean, if you want a fishing license, it's not so important to know that you are who you say you are. But if you want to have a passport, it's really critical that we be able to confirm that person's identity. Do you want to continue the? So
I think your question was about, is identity a set of attributes, and how does that get shared? So yeah, I mean, in a practical sense, identity, the way we are interpreting is identity information. It's not philosophical identity, who are we, and all of that, right? But it boils down into the standard attributes that we have on driver's licenses that most of us are known by today, the way government identifies people. I mean, government is the source of identity in Canada, but I believe fundamentally in all other jurisdictions. You're born, you're registered, and then you carry on your identity from there. For the service that we've built, we are not sharing attributes, all attributes with every relying party. It very much is what attributes do you need to do your business, and then only those get configured to be shared with that relying party. At this point in time, we really only have these core government attributes. We are not reaching out and getting attributes from banks or attributes from other sources. The thing that Ryan was talking about sounds very interesting. I'd like to have coffee with you later. But the idea of all of the different back-end authoritative sources and how that works, that's something that I've been challenged in thinking of. How would you put that together without creating a massive database, but doing that in a dynamic way of which attributes are needed at what point in time, and you go and pull them and then deliver them effectively to a relying party, and how that works. But right now, so we have controls in place to share only attributes that are intentional, that are meant for this transaction, as well as the user control and consent and choices in the matter, that they can see what is going to be shared and have an opportunity to cancel out of a transaction if it's got attributes that they didn't want to be shared at all.
I just want to build on my own. I'm going to say something that's maybe controversial, but it's just my own kind of opinion watching this whole space, is when it comes to attributes, it's become recognized. Actually, that's the first time I heard Ryan describe it this way. It's a different description, but it falls into the same thing, static and dynamic attributes. So to me, the things that we would call static attributes are really the things that truly go to identity, that it is that person. And then the dynamic attributes are really about authorization. So the things that tend to change tend to be things related to authorization. Am I a good credit risk? Am I a first responder? Am I a doctor? And so those tend to be really authorization questions and not identity questions per se. So that's my own kind of experience in watching the space so far. The only thing that is a static attribute that can really change today is surnames. So some people change surname through marriage or through legal name change, but that's kind of an edge case. So your static attributes tend to be static, and so we don't really need to be doing refreshes on those. What you do want to know is about the authorization things. Am I still a good credit risk? Am I still a customer? Am I still a first responder, as an example? Those tend to be dynamic, and that's not my view. Those attributes aren't truly identity. Those are authorization questions.
So just to add to that, and I can't believe I'm actually getting ready to use the word pseudonymity, but yeah. Anyway, that's where the value of that comes into play, right? Is that you don't need to know that I am Ryan Fox. You just need to know that it's a real identity with that particular attribute about it, right? So you can have that concept as well.
Actually, this is another mantra, and like this is now I'm going to start ranting. I'll catch myself here, but we often mix up identity with name, right? Your name is not your identity, right? So that's the thing we've got to kind of pull out of identity. Is your identity is not your name. It's an element of your identity, but it's not your identity.
Okay, so we have time for one more question. Am I giving it, or are you guys? Okay, go ahead.
The question is, if you're going to use a brokerage type situation, what criteria or what do you have in place to say, hey, bank A and B got, they had a security breach, the ID's gone out to 1 million people. How do you really turn them off? You got to think about that side, because you're actually going to use another bank's or another entity's ID to get into the state and federal level information where you can do a lot of damage to a person. How do you really turn them off as soon as you know that they've been hacked and that they're no longer a trusted source?
So let me just talk about, that's what that CNA model for the government of Canada, which is similar to the Cantara framework, kind of talks about. The truth is, as government, you face that risk already, right? So the question really is what kind of risk that you want to have. If my credential gets breached to government, the chance that me, the user, is going to notice is very, very remote, because I'm not going to come back for at least a year. So you've got a long-running thing with a masquerading user that is, from your point of view, undetectable, because you can't tell if it's really me or not. By contrast, if it's a bank credential, if the user can't get in, they're going to complain right away, and they tend to be vigorous about it. So the recovery tends to happen much sooner. That's the first point. The next point is that banks are very sophisticated, because of their transaction velocity, have a very sophisticated model, and they can detect what's out of pattern for me very, very quickly. And so if this is a login from Brazil, for me, they're going to recognize that's kind of completely out of character, and their guard's going to be up right away. So to keep the privacy model whole, the government of Canada does not actually have a direct reach down to the bank credential themselves to find out what's going on. They'll be in one of two conditions. So if it was fraud all along, and if the bank had a fraud user in from the outset, what the bank will do is turn that credential off and a police proceeding will begin, and that'll have its own judicial outcome. The government of Canada has the benefit of knowing that they'll never see the credential again. If it was fraud, the bank will turn it off and they'll never see it again. So the user cannot come to the government with that credential anymore. If it was an account takeover, it wasn't a legitimate enrollment, and the account was taken over, the good news is we'll be able to identify the period of time in which it was at risk, and we can share that information through a judicial process with the government of Canada, and they can do their own remediation that way.
So if let's say Bang A gets hacked and they alter IDs, get out and everything like that, you don't have a way of actually shutting them off and saying, no, sorry, we're not going to use you as a trusted source anymore.
In theory, the government actually does have that. Is actually if there was an Uber breach, they actually have the ability with their veto power to say, sorry, we're not taking those anymore. In fact, when unrelated to this service at all, actually, when the Heartbleed thing happened, they actually turned off all access for a period of time until they could sort it out. And so that was a good thing for CRA, our IRS, to do, was to turn off the service until they could sort it out. And the Open SSL thing allowed them to figure out where their exposures were, and they were able to remediate, and they were down for 5 days, but they were able to sort it out themselves. We've never had an incidence of broad-based breach in Canada from a bank. So, and I think it's actually very rare in the U.S. too. Like, you don't see the Evernote and Target-style breaches happening at the banks. It doesn't happen. And so their controls tend to be quite high because, one, is that they're regulated and they want to keep their license, and two, their own business interests require that they do so. And so, from a trust point of view, this is the government couldn't ask for a better underlying provider because the banks are so well regulated and they're so rigorous in their processes. I don't know, Kristen?
Well, I would add that it's a question of reputation as well.
Yeah.
Right? The banks want to maintain their reputation as trustworthy the same way as CRA or the IRS here. There's only one chance of losing one's reputation, so you want to be very vigorous in your response.
So I just want to build on that and say it a different way. What's important for the government of Canada here is recognizing that the banks have their own motivation to get it right. Separate and apart and serving in this network, they have their own motivation to get it right, which is that they're running a bank. Separate and apart from the service, they have to get it right anyway. So the motivators are already aligned at the outset.
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a point on that one as well, and that is that compromised credentials are only a problem until you realize that they are compromised, because at that point you can not accept them. And in order for it to be sent to the government, that's an active decision by the bank after authentication. They have to actually send the token. And so if they see the credentials are not there, they don't have to send it. It's not that those credentials are used elsewhere.
Yeah,
Right, so like a payment card, they can shut down the risk right away. So when we have a fraudulent credit card, the user calls up and says, hey, I lost the card's turned off, now useless in the hands of the person who found it because no merchant will accept it because the network will say no. It works the same way.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the responsibility of the IDP or the CSP to notify the broker and the RP of any breach that occurs anyway. It's not, at least in the majority of the environments that we're exercising in, there's not a responsibility on the part of the broker to notice a breach or a change in velocity because you're simply a broker. You're
Right.
allowing that connectivity in those transactions to occur. It's actually the legal and liability responsibility of the CSP to provide that notification.
In the Canadian model, they actually don't provide direct notification, they just turn the credential off.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Go ahead. Last one.
So congratulations on your working strategy. It sounds like you've got your act together. Can you comment from the perspective of what you've learned and then as you look southward at the U.S., how are we doing in the U.S. with regard to our NSNIP approach and in terms of getting the banks and the government together and what's happening with CIS? Canadian thoughts, that's what I mean.
You want to start?
Well, I would simply say that we work very closely with our colleagues in the U.S., as I said at the very beginning, and there's quite a bit of exchange. I mean, we look at challenges together, and we always learn from each other, and that will be my diplomatic answer to this question. But I'm sure that André can be a little bit
So they're actually, the government of U.S. actually noticed and took notice of what's happening in Canada. Said, how the hell did you figure this out? Was kind of the question. And so there's been a lot of dialogue with the U.S. government, the Canadian government about, tell us how you did this, what can we learn from? And so from an outsider's point of view, I can see that there is a continuing dialogue, and it's been valuable and fruitful. That did lead to the final issuance of the FCCX proposal that went out, and so the Canadian model actually underpins a lot of the thinking that's gone into FCCX. So now where we are in the US is that we've got a model with the same kind of hub strategy. What's lacking so far is getting a large number of consumer-oriented IDPs. And so the government's just released in the last few days, actually, an RFP to get broad-based IDPs to participate in this network, so Americans will be able to use something that all Americans would have, something that they choose to present for service. So that RFP just came out in the last few days. The government will review the responses that they get back, and I'm hoping that banks and the carriers, as an example, along with all the FICAN providers, will be in the mix, so Americans will have lots of choice about how they decide to present for service. So it's emerging, it's not done, but I think that's where it's going to go.
As long as it's quick.
I see a challenge or an issue with the way the street identity and identity I'm not saying anything wrong with it. This doesn't sound great. Just looking at, for example, countries like Malaysia, where they introduced something called My Card, which is a personal identification card as well as a digital application card. So you have a single identity card that you use to withdraw money from your bank account, as well as your driver's license, as well as you can go to the library.
Yeah, Lena, I know where you're going, and I agree. What we don't want is an Uber card, a single card for everything. That's a bad idea. And so what's important is that building on this choice message is very, very important. Choice, control, convenience for users. So if as a user, if I want to have one bank card and do my entire life through that, I can. If I decided I wanted to, I could actually get one credit card for every merchant I wanted to go to as well. Important in this model is making sure users have choice about how do they want to configure their life. In real world, with credit cards, if I want to have one credit card, I can. My wife, she likes loyalty. She has 10 credit cards. So users should be able to configure their life the way they want to. As it relates to access, as it relates to identity, the truth is that the state is the seat of identity. Both in Canada and the US, at the state level, that's where your identity lives. You don't exist until they say you exist, right? There's been a good case law here in the US. There was a guy who wanted to take off on his wife and not make alimony payments, so he just took off, and he made it look like a death. So he was dead, and he was living in Florida, but his wife went to court and said, my husband's dead, and I want to collect the benefits from his pension. So she did. She got the court to say he was dead, and so she got his benefits. 10 years after the fact, he came back and said, I was in Florida, and I want to get a driver's license again. And he went to court to get his identity back, and the court said, I'm sorry, you're dead. And that's what happened.
The government said so.
Which is the
You
ultimate
cannot
in a
get-
bureaucratic nightmare right there, isn't it?
I would also comment that it's a question of also looking at the reality of your country. In the case of Canada, we have to take a look at public opinion and whether the Canadian public would be prepared to have a national ID card, as you suggest. And that perhaps is not in the card for a little while. It's a question of taking a look at the fabric of your society and composing with the reality of that. And that's where a federated approach is a more appropriate approach in the Canadian context, and will make it work.
I'd just close that by saying, in fact, that in the U.S., I know that the concept, in Canada, U.S., and UK, the concept of a national ID card is a political lightning rod, and it's a bad idea. I agree with that. But as a matter of fact, as de facto, the driver's license is the de facto identity card. This is what you use when you want to get a mortgage. This is what you use when you want to get on a plane. This is what you use when you want to get into a bar. This is what you use when you want to enroll at school. This is your de facto identity document that you use for everything. We just got to start recognizing that and provide the users with the tools to be able to use it online as well.
And so for the province of BC, I mean, it's just building on the way society is working, what's accepted, and asking for the dialogue, not trying to build a national ID card.
So the key in getting that right is actually just to close that. What's important is not what it is, but what it can do, right? When you look at this, this is actually a powerful card, and you can, with this thing, you can be me, right? That's the downside of it, but the important part is that user allows me to accomplish a lot. Everything I need to do in my street life, I can accomplish with this card. It's very important to me. What we need to do is evolve this thing so I can use it online too.
And with that, we're going to cut it off.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to thank you all for coming out here in the morning. I'm hoping you have a wonderful rest of the conference. It's now, I believe there's lunch outside here, so we can go out and eat. And thank you very much for all of our panelists and our speakers. And if you have any interest in joining Kantara, you want to come out and see what's going on, the URL is kantarainitiative.org. And the website's up there. You can get membership or all the discussion groups, and all of that information is there. So thank you very much to all of our speakers, and enjoy the rest of the show.